Thank you for joining us today. For the benefit of participants who are blind or have a visual impairment, all speakers will begin with a short self-description. My name is Malebu Sipodi. I am a South African Black femme. I have a Black curly afro, and I'm wearing red framed reading glasses, and I'm wearing a pink top. And I am your moderator for today's digital dialogue. Today, we are putting the spotlight on amplifying underrepresented voices. What would a gender equal approach to remote working look like? Although remote working is not a new phenomenon, the COVID-19 pandemic shifted the traditional place-based employment model in cities across the world virtually overnight. Mobile connectivity and digital infrastructure has allowed people to work from home, and some argue it has bolstered the working force within the growing gig economy. Remote work has been praised with many merits, such as increased productivity, greater employee happiness, improved work-life balance. You know, a 2021 LinkedIn study reveals that women are more likely to apply to remote positions despite the increased flexibility remote work can offer working women. An article published in Forbes raises concerns that the new hybrid workplace could turn some women into second-class employees. Now, the main argument of this article states that working remotely doesn't just offer women possibilities to find balance between their work life and their family duties, but it also comes at a cost. Women are still less likely to be promoted. They are underrepresented in leadership positions, they get paid less and experience disadvantages after having children. All of these factors, may contribute to entrenching existing gender pay gaps. In terms of maintaining a healthy work-life balance, research emphasizes how women who work remotely are faced with different opportunities and challenges than men in these situations. The hidden taxes on women, and this is like a debate that happens in many countries. These taxes that are hidden, they are a good example that illustrates gender differentiation and dynamics, particularly those working in countries of the global South. Now, to help us discuss these questions and more, we are delighted to welcome our panelists, Dr. Tendani Mulanga Chimboza, who is joining us from South Africa, and Dr. Prince Charles Dixon, who is joining us from Nigeria. So now each panelist will introduce us, they'll give us a brief description and their input for 7 minutes, and then we'll have some discussion and questions. So remember, what questions that you come up with, any comments, please do put them in the chat box and I'll be able to ask them to the panelists throughout the discussion. Tendani, welcome. I am looking forward to your perspective. Please don't forget your self-description. You may now unmute yourself and switch on your video. I look forward to carrying on this discussion with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Malebu. So I am Dr. Tendani Chimboza. I am wearing currently, this is a very colorful orange, red, and green and black top. I work at the University of Cape Town. I am from the Limpopo province, and I'm Venda, a mom and a wife. So that is my the title. This is my attempt of for this question that we have before us. If we can go to the next slide. So this is what we know for sure about remote working. We know that globally, 27% of women are likely to apply for remote work. And we know that 60% of the women report that they enjoy the flexibility of remote working, given the work schedule that it gives them, and also given the opportunity to do all the many responsibilities that they do. Also, we know for a fact that globally, if in the global South, women tend to take responsibility of childcare and household activities while in the global north, we have seen a new trend where men are starting to opt for remote work jobs, and sometimes leaving their work completely to go and take care of the children. So on the left is more about the challenges of remote work that have been described fully by Malibu in the beginning, but we can see that a lot of women accept that remote working sort of affects collaboration, real-time communication, managing relationships, with coworkers virtually is very problematic, especially in the global south, where there are a lot of organizations that have, command and control work culture, where there is, a need where, it's usually a male manager who wants to see people at work and believe that they can micromanage when they are in their vicinity. So, and the other aspect to this is that because of, especially in Africa, because of the different cultural traditions and beliefs, and some stereotypes associated with working women or very educated women, it can introduce some anxiety for women, to fight for growth in their career and be able to continue committing to their household and child caring activities. And perhaps maybe let me just give you a scenario. I am a university lecturer and a researcher. My husband is a GIS specialist, so we work from home. I do have help. However, sometimes the help does go away. On the days that the help is away, I have to wake up at 5:30 in the morning. I have to wake up at 5:30 in the morning, ensure that I wash the child, put together food for the child, and take the child to school. At that time, the whole time, my husband is still sleeping. And after that, I have to come back, make breakfast for us, tidy up the house, and then start working at around 9:30 to 10. At that time, my husband has already started working at around 8:30. Just before lunch, I have to worry about fixing us a snack or something to eat, and I later have to worry about the food to eat. This is just very practical of it. And of course, I have to convince each other that, oh, let's walk to go and fetch the child from school. And again, I have to worry about what to do when the child is back from school. This is just practically from my side. Does this affect my productivity? Yes, it does, incredibly, because most of the time, innately, I have this belief or cultural thing that will be blackmailing me in the background. What would my mother say if I make my husband cook? What would my mother say if I leave all these roles and responsibilities to me? However, there are times where via empathy, the husband does help. And of course, we get to a happier place. But the point is that there are many times that, I will find myself juggling with those activities. Next slide. And I have also noticed that across the continent, South Africa is one of the countries that have somewhat, it's leading in terms of women working from home and having to even, somewhat prosper. However, because of the many traditional beliefs that we have across the continent, the very clearly defined gender roles that we have, it is still very difficult for women to work remotely. And you will, maybe I should ask for forgiveness for not putting a disclaimer. So the fact that I am very well acquainted with women's role. I have not explored the other genders like the trans or queer in terms of remote working. So so here is just me trying to conceptualize some, somewhat not conceptualized remote working across genders. Those are some of the unintentional consequences of remote working that have not been thoroughly explored, that sort of make people question remote working. So remote working does introduce the notion of digital pacifier. This is where we just give our children devices, mobile devices, so that we can work from work, and unfortunately, we can work from home. Unfortunately, we don't really monitor the screen time and content, because the point is that they should just not disturb us. And there is an emergence of technopharynx. So this is about using technologies and working from home that affects our interpersonal relationships for parenting or for spousal relationship. And of course, this is when, I'll give an example, when a man is trying very hard to stay at the position that they are. So you will find that the husband would be on the screen most of the time, and we have to understand that daddy has to work and we don't have to disturb them, but also it introduces a very difficult picture. I'm sure you can see in the images that I have put, where almost everybody has a device and we are just all on our devices and neglecting the quality time that we should have at home. And then, of course, there are work-related information security compliance challenges, because it is not all the time that I'm almost done. So it's not all the time that working from a home situation would consider security protocols from work, and it can leave digital assets of the work vulnerable. The final slide that has some sort of solution. So yes, there is a need for organizations to create policies that are inclusive for both genders and for everyone. And nation states have to raise awareness about opportunities in remote working, especially avenues for navigating cultural traditions and beliefs that marginalize women efficiency while working from home. And that's it from my side. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tendani. Those are really great points to reflect on. What I particularly enjoyed is the reflexivity in your presentation, and I'm sure we'll touch more on that. And now, if you could switch off your video, and if we could have Dr. Prince on the screen, please unmute yourself and switch on your video. And I'm looking forward to hear some of your points. Introduce yourself, and also don't forget to begin with a self-description. Over to you, Prince.
It's still evening in this part of the globe, mid-afternoon, so to say. My name is Prince Charles Dixon, and I work within the development sector, specifically doing engagements in the conflict and peace building thematic area. I work north central Nigeria, Plateau State specifically. The work I would rather classify as a peace practitioner and a policy analyst. Interestingly, I've had cross-cutting engagement in women and gender, and in recent times, gender studies, and that's where my interest lies in the essence of this conversation. Let's not necessarily talk too much about myself. I'm what in Nigeria you would quietly call fair, but it's a dark background, and I've got a dread, which is non-Nigerian for a man. So it's a long dread. I wear glasses, and currently I'm wearing just a t-shirt, a branded official office t-shirt. I think that pretty much is me. That sums up who I am. Discussing this, it's been quite interesting listening to Dr. Tendani and her experiences, which is pretty much African, and I can relate, and I understand, and I do totally agree with points she's raised. A gender equal approach to remote working seems to have a conversation, seems to put the conversation around prioritizing, creating an environment where uh, it's inclusive and equitable for most women employees. But you see, in our own part of the globe, even in the conventional work environment, women don't get inclusivity, women don't get equitable, fair share of how work is actually spread across in terms of gender. But again, in the context of this conversation, I think the key conversation for me is around when we say gender equal approach, like my colleague put it. First of all, I want to look at flexible working hours. Um, the idea for remote working is to prioritize flexibility in working hours to accommodate the needs and the responsibilities of, in this case, women. But again, when you look at the context, caregiving, household responsibilities, it's tough for women already. It's like there's already a bus stop, there's already a hedge before we even start the conversation. And for women, it's difficult, especially, I would say, as a father, as a husband, there are African demands in terms of gender conversation. There are structural demands that make it even more difficult for women. So how do you, in remote work, allow for women to set their own schedules or provide options that, for example, reduces their hours or help them micromanage those hours? Another key factor is addressing issues in communication itself when we're talking about remote working, because I'm smiling as I say this, as the African woman would tend to talk a lot. And then you're asking remote working in terms of the existing bias in such communication issues, particularly around gender. How do we approach it? How do we prioritize addressing these biases, ensuring that women have equal opportunities to participate in, say, for example, meetings and other forms of communications that remote working has thrown at us? Another factor for me is trying to encourage or bring in perspective work-life balance. I've noticed from experience and from little research that remote working basically can blur lines, and it does blur lines between work and personal life. And this can be particularly challenging with women who have, for example, caregiving responsibilities, people who find it difficult naturally to prioritize work-life balance. Most would not know at what point to take a break, and taking those breaks and what it means to their general well-being. Again, I think in the introduction, Malabo spoke beautifully to that. Have we been able to address the gender pay gap? Because remote working itself should be further in terms of, as we go, discuss the issue of pay equally, ensuring that women, regardless, get the same or fairly enough for the work they do. And this could, in fact, we've talked about this extensively, the need to have things like pay equity analysis, taking decisions that address gaps that are pretty much identified in terms of this. I say, speaking generally now, that remote work itself or remote working can be, for women and for all genders basically, have positive and of course negative effects. But on women in workforce, on one hand, I believe that remote work creates and provides greater flexibility and work-life balance, which particularly is important for women beyond caregiving. just as women. But on the other hand, I think it could also escalate existing gender inequalities in workplace. Of course, particularly around the issue of pay, particularly again around the issue of career advancement, promotion, and conversations there. Let me put a stop here, and as we go, I would look extensively at caregiving responsibilities. I already see somebody in the box saying, "Did you hear me say African women talk a lot?" I would probably say a few things on gender bias in communication, and of course, lack of access to resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prince, and thank you to that last note that you actually spoke on. I want to just have you for a second here before I bring in Tendani. So I want you to speak to that whole African women talk a lot, and speak to it in terms of, you know, the stereotypes and the way that we think of women and how those fit in the roles and how those fit in the navigation of how we think about equity, particularly in the workplace. And it was Tendani who spoke about, you know, the traditional cultural structure usually mirror the way that people show up, particularly in African communities, right? And so when you use, you know, words like African women talk a lot, I'd like you to just clarify that a little bit in context of today's conversation.
Now, in context of today's conversation, I would say very, very with a sense of high responsibility that it's intentional. And there are two sides of it. It helps me to and helps us to have conversation around breaking this gender biases in communication. So particularly here, we're talking about remote working and remote work, which indeed exacerbates existing gender biases in communication, particularly if there are unequal opportunities for participation. Say, for example, in real-time meetings or virtual meetings or other forms of communication. The truth of the matter is, from my perspective, when we say there's a need for women to be involved in women, peace, and security, to be part of the conversation around security spaces, digital spaces, it is from the context of the change that they bring. But you see, in the general stereotype, it is from the context of, oh, that woman's going to take all the time. The woman won't deliver because she wouldn't be able to keep the schedule. And so if we don't have conversations around ensuring equitable distribution in terms of not just pay in this case, in terms of not just communication, but regardless of the gender, having equal opportunities to have contributions, to have conversation, to have narratives had, to have women had, then of course, you would see that there's a lot of gap still waiting to be filled. I recall in her opening remarks, she had said something, Victor had said something to the effect that she also said to herself, what would my mother think? What would my, so these are biases that have stayed, and through the work we do with those we work with, we try consistently to reinforce it so that we can have the conversation around what is right and how can we look at it from the right perspective.
Okay. Thank you so much, Prince. I think we'll delve more into that. So Tendani, please feel free to switch on your video and join the conversation as we get into the second part of today's dialogue. And this time it will just provide the panelists and myself to have a conversation based on the presentations, and then we will go into the questions that are coming in or that have come in before. And at any stage, if you have any question, please do put it in the chat box and I'll make sure that I get it to the panelists. So Tendani, Prince, if you could also have your video on, that would be really great. So, you know, when we talk about these gender equal approaches to remote work, so you spoke about the challenges and opportunities that present themselves to remote work. But when we talk about within the workplace itself, do you think there are any changes, particularly with what Prince has said? And what I do like about, I forgot to say, what I do like about this part of the conversation is that many times we work in silos in our different industries, in our different disciplines. So these kind of dialogues assist us to have interdisciplinary conversations and have, you know, cross-intersectional conversation. So with regards to Prince's points, what are the major challenges that still prevent us from, achieving equity? Things like promotion in the workplace, things like leadership opportunities in the workplace, things like policies, that do, favor the marginalized genders in the workplace. And if you have anything particular that Prince said that has kind of sparked your interest and you want to ask him a question or speak to that, please feel free.
Thank you very much. So I am going to choose not to catch feelings from African women talk a lot. So I'm just going to say that I'm going to say it is true. It has been a liberating function of African women. I think I am finding myself here as a Black woman academic because women talked. So with regards to the promotion in the workplace, I'm very practical. So in most, you will remember during COVID when we were working, most of us, I had to apologize all the time because I felt that, oh no, I'm beginning a meeting and Tadiwa is gonna run here and so I had to apologize in advance. Promotion, well, it is interesting because majority of us here, or I work in the IT industry. So in the slides that I have, in the notes, I had to do like a little background, desktop research. And it was interesting to see that women are unattractive, especially for highly technical jobs, because they require them to be present for a long time. And women are said not to be able to be flexible because they bear the brunt of majority of the activities in the home. But that sounds cliche, right? Okay, let's break it down. So if there is traveling involved, research shows that an organization will choose an unmarried man or a man altogether, because there is this idea that a woman will raise that, oh, can we move it to this time, or can we move it to, so the organization has to feel that they have to sacrifice to work around women's time, while on the men's side it's just a matter of finding when is the next available time. And because at home, again, African women cannot fight the fact that, oh no, but we have karate on Saturday, why are you leaving? I will just have to accept that it is just what it is. Daddy has to go and work for us. So those are some of the practical challenges that we have to overcome. And it is an implicit policy that is existing, that it's not written in any organization, but we just see men being the ones that are progressing. Once a woman gets married and they have children, they become less attractive. And I think that is also the case in the Western world. They become less attractive for highly demanding work, especially from a technical perspective in IT industry. I hope I have answered you.
Thank you so much, Tandani. And I'd like to keep you here just to address something that has come up due to Dr. Prince's statement. And when I did pose the question to Dr. Prince, is that, we do have stereotypes, and we need to be able to create safe spaces when we have conversations like this. And especially when we invite men, there needs to be a lot of reflexivity in the terms of languages that we use, and in the terms of the stereotypes that continue to be perpetuated. And I would like to take the moment just to apologize to our members today who have joined us, to the audience, for any triggers that have occurred, and if the space has not been safe enough. And so with that said, we have some conversation that's happening within the chat box. and I want to read it out so that maybe Tendani, you could help us here. And I will also just like, just to get a directive from our host as well in terms of how do we continue, because I personally was triggered as well by that statement. So I want to read the comments so that, because these are important, I think it's important for us to see these dynamics play out. And I feel like they are triggering, and we do need to address them. And if it was according to me, I would ask Dr. Prince to kind of excuse himself from the conversation, but I will wait for the host to give us a headway on that.
I'm sorry, Malibu. I am so sorry. I know it's not in the program, but I need to ask something very quickly. And I don't know if now I'm going to be falling under the bus as well, but I want to understand the other side of it. Né? If we are to twist it and look at the other suffering of men for having to commit to cultural tradition, and not I'll give you an example, right? My husband would not stand in the kitchen, right? If my family members from Venda are there, solely because they would say, "Oh no, you cannot do this. You're a man." And what about that discussion? Like Prince, is that what you were referring to? Are you referring to the fact that women talk a lot and it downplays the man's voice? Is that where it's coming from? Maybe he can just clarify us there, because this is supposed to be a safe space, yes, but at the same time we have to have difficult conversations.
Yeah, just hold on to that. I want to read the comments so that we do make this as participatory as possible, just so that we hear what our audience are saying about this. So we have a comment that says, I actually think that African women talk a lot should really be digged in as a theme of this. What happens in remote work, in Zoom conferences, when an African woman opens the mic? Is she more discredited more than usual, based on the idea that anyway she will talk a lot? So time for making coffee, answering a message, how the bias enters the dynamics in Zoom, on what and who we pay attention to. We have another one that says, I don't feel that Dr. Prince addressed the expression, and I'm disturbed by Pacific's comments. I don't feel that this is a safe space to discuss such a topic. Therefore, I am leaving. So maybe let me throw it back to you, Prince. Would you like to speak to that, especially with what Dr. Tendani has also said? And I think this moment is an important moment, because as Tendani has also put it forward in her presentation, that there are a lot of cultural norms that a lot of African women from marginalized societies have to deal with in terms of internal oppression, have to deal with. And how do you navigate, these challenges? So with hearing all of this that has come forward, which is an important teaching moment for all of us, Dr. Prince, as I get a directive from Tendani, would you like to speak on that? Just unmute yourself.
Just a second, sorry. Like I wrote extensively on the chat box. This is it. Is that my opinion that women talk a lot? No. I don't think everybody talks. If you have to talk, you talk. A lot, a little, it's relative. There are men who talk. That's not the context. The context has to be understood in the context of this conversation around cultural norms, gender roles, especially in the global South. And like I said, these are deeply ingrained cultural norms. They are gender roles that are assigned to for specific reasons to women. For example, in the domestic context, and often than not, these would cause women, for example, to be excluded from certain jobs, from certain sectors, from certain types of work. Okay, I'll give you an example. Like Dr. Tandeni was saying, in Nigeria, there are lots of women in the tech industry, but not so much of them because there's a general cultural belief that, oh, women shouldn't be doing tech things. It's a man's tech thing. Do I believe that? No. And then the idea is to change that perception, to change that thinking, not to validate it. Do I validate that women? No, 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 no. I work within women, peace and security, and I engage women. And I am of the opinion, strong opinion, that more women should be engaged within that space. And so, but if you don't address it, to hear other opinions, to have people bring their view as to whether or not, or whether they should, then you will be lying to yourself.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Prince. And again, to everybody, we would like to apologize if this conversation is triggering. Please do send your questions and your comments and put them in the chat box. And we will try by all means to create a safe space. I will start asking the questions that have been brought forward by some of our audience. And thank you so much to Ada for actually bringing this conversation well. And I hope that the hosts, they've noted this particular point, because I think it's something that needs to continue, in the dialogues. It's an important critical conversation to have. So there's one question that asks, are you aware of any initiatives to sensitive companies and HR professionals on the impact of remote work on women, particularly in the global South, where housework and childcare are not often shared? So we have spoken mainly about, many times, in a nuclear family, or the roles of men and women, but we do have households where the domestic duties are not shared, and this question is for that. I'll read it again. Are you aware of any initiatives to sensitive companies and HR professionals on the impact of remote work on women, particularly in the global South, where housework and childcare are not often shared? Tandani?
No, I don't know of any initiative. I just know that last year, University of Cape Town introduced what is called 4 days of wellness. This was because there was like a 2-minute revolt where people were saying the university is not understanding the pain that we have to go through juggling between hybrid lecturing, when the technology falls apart and the students are bombarding you with emails. So the stress related to that triggered a lot of people to start, just being passive, literally just doing that which needs to be done. And the university introduced 4 days of wellness. That's the only thing. It wasn't any gender focused, it was across.
Okay. And I will just link that question to another one that that has just come up here. It says, oh, I've lost it now. Oh yeah, so Zetu Lubisi says, this is an interesting topic and it's linked to my current study. Seemingly the challenge for WLB affect more women than it does to men, and some of the issues occurs from the home side of things. How can that be improved to ensure equity in the working environment? What policies could be implemented to ensure equal opportunities for all? Dr. Prince, do you want to tackle that one?
I lost you for a second.
Okay, so this, it's in the chat box. It's by Zetu Lubisi. This is an interesting topic, and it's linked to my current study. Seemingly, the challenges for WLB affect more women than it does to men, and some of the issues occurs from the home side of things. How can that be improved to ensure equity in the working environment? What policies could be implemented to ensure equal opportunities for all?
Somehow again, it drags us back again. You find out in the home front. Again, I know it's pretty much sensitive, but again, we still have to touch some of these issues in the context of the home front. Let me say this by looking at the last question, which actually interloops into this. In the global south, there are largely no defined HR policy that really is for women. So like you had in South Africa where you have wellness. In Nigeria, what the government did over the last few 1-2 years was to say men can now go on maternity leave. So when your wife has a baby or she's about to have a baby, you can also be on break to help her. And what we've done in this part is more like domestication. And because we're domesticating, the conversation does not largely carry our culture or the culture of the environment. The ILO, for example, the International Labour Organization, had a toolkit that I think, if I'm correct, was developed post-COVID, which was more like a guidance on addressing disproportionate impact of work, especially remote work on women. Now, the question would be for me, were African women, were global South countries, nations taken into cognizance while that PEAK was being developed? I know there's a policy brief also on gender impacts remote work for women. But you see, again, some of the cultural nuisances are left hanging and not talked about. And so when it comes to practical terms, the woman is still, I mean, like Dr. Tendeni was talking about things like promotion, things like having spaces that where her equity as a person would not be stamped on. So you find out that it's a delicate rope to tread. If I mean, for further resources, I did like some of our listeners to go look at the I think the World Economic Forum Global Task Force on the Future of Work, which emphasizes a focus on gender and work and develops a few recommendations on how we can have equitable is the conversation, equitable is the word for all across all gender. And I think until we get to that point, it's still a conversation in the making. What are the roles, stereotypes for women outside workplace and in workplace?
Thank you so much. Tendani, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so last year I happened to go to a big event in Kenya. And while I was there, I could still see that, oh, I'm still one of the few women that are there. And in the evening, there was a big party. And in this big party, again, the women get fewer. The others have gone home. The ones who are from Kenya, they have gone home. And I am the one who is still there. And there are still those stereotypes of what am I doing at night in the party drinking when, people have gone home. And I was thinking to myself, I have also gone through the conference and the stresses of it the way that the person has done. So why should I not enjoy the party as well? But the conversation now went further into what is it that you do when you're back in South Africa? And I mentioned what I do. And people seemed to be shocked that I have moved that fast in my career at my age, right? Yes, we are not coming up with practical solutions about the African woman in the workplace. And Alizwa, Jonas, I can tell you, it's because nobody is prepared to really accept that. Although the global north is moving very fast in terms of introducing new ways of work and we also want to join this bus, but we have neglected the big things that control how we live on a daily basis. And those are our African cultures. And I think women need to talk more. We need to talk more. We need to go ahead and talk more about how best can we work remotely. And I did mention in my talk earlier that it is only over empathy that the man at home will help you. And also it's also when the man has some cultural intelligence to be able to assist the woman at home. When you go back to the workplace, the management itself does not have intercultural intelligence to understand how to navigate this, African women way of working remotely. How about introducing flexible hours that will allow me to do whatever the things that I have to do? But remember, the working hours that we have are again Western. Okay, it is like when you're introducing socialist ideologies, but you are operating on a capitalistic environment. Those are two contradicting systems. So it is us that need to work out, navigate ways in our cultures. And it's us, the so-called educated women, who have to do this. I understand the prejudice that comes with this, or is it stereotypes, or is it the stigma that comes with a very loud woman saying, I think Malebu knows Tendani very well in my spaces. I brought along my child in meetings, in face-to-face meetings, and if things are really, really hard, I will just, the furthest I will go is to apologize and mute and say, can I speak next? Because I need to deal with this right now.
Yeah.
Because of the responsibilities that I have. So we are the ones who need to start the action. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I really want to get a question in because our time is limited, and I would also like to have our closing remarks. So Tendani, I'm going to ask you to also address this question because, whenever we speak about remote work, we do know that it's also quite exclusionary conversations. I'm going to talk about South Africa in this stage. And Nigeria has the similar challenges as well. We have load shedding, which is scheduled power cuts that pose a major problem for remote workers, especially those who cannot afford to pay for alternative energy sources. But we also have issues around data costs and access, to the internet, and all sorts of issues, particularly for people who are not only taking their jobs from the office to remotely, but also those who are applying for remote positions that might not be in their locations. What are your thoughts on how to address this? And we have like 10 minutes left. So if you could just, in 1 minute, Tendani.
Load shedding, right? Load shedding means that we now have to learn how to manage our times very well. Load shedding also means that in addition to the many things that we are dealing with, it is interesting when you're working with people in Australia because they don't understand what's going on. You have to explain that I might not meet the deadline because of this and this and that. And of course, it just affects the infrastructure altogether. And people joke about it, but it's not a joke that, it's affecting our economy. It's just making us go downwards as life goes on. I think that's all I can say about load shedding. I don't know. It's challenging to navigate remote working without electricity. That's it.
Thank you. And Prince, do you want to speak to that?
I largely want to agree with Dr. Tendani. It just tells you, it also, again, now you look at this conversation, and let me add a little bit of dynamism to it. To a whole lot of people, if you stay in the global north, even the word load shedding you begin to ask, what are you shedding? What's load shedding? You have neighborhoods, these are large industrial neighborhoods, work cities where you only get electricity maybe 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, or 1 day in 3 days. And you can imagine, let's say a classic example is I'm having this conversation from a part of Nigeria where there's load shedding at this hour. So if I don't have access to alternative power, I can't be part of this conversation. You won't change the time, and we wouldn't have first place. So you find out that some of these things are in their very essence dynamic to probably a set of a perspective, a set of culture, a set of people. And if we keep shying away from it, if we keep running away from it, let me end by a personal experience. So I was opportune to go to some part of of Nigeria. And I think the video even went viral, and we were discussing with a group of farmers who were introduced to solar power energy. And they just asked those who brought it to come carry the solar panels, that that the solar panels were responsible for the low yield, that they don't know what those solar panels were doing. You can imagine that level of ignorance. Yes, on one hand, level of ignorance, but on the other hand, no one's explaining climate change to them. No one is explaining the essence of those solar panels and how it can help in terms of their production, their farming, and all that. These are dynamics, but same for South Africa, same for Nigeria, loads of parts of Africa.
Thank you so much, Prince. And I'd like to just give us some great thoughts by one of our audience members, Alizwa Jonas, who has said, "This is a meaningful conversation. I truly respect the fact that as a society, we are well aware of the cultural household demands that African women bear, but I don't think we have yet reached a conclusion on the practical ways and solutions that workplaces can implement to ensuring and promoting gender equity in remote working places." And many of the conversations and the debates that have come up today have clearly showed that there's a lot of work to do. And this is an important conversation for us to continue having. And I hope that the next dialogues will continue, allowing us for this critical engagement. So before we close off, I personally want to thank Tendani and Prince for, it was an important and uncomfortable conversation. And I do think that we will have, these kind of challenges in a conversation like this, particularly based on, our backgrounds and currently what we see happening in the world. Short, half a second closing statement from you, Prince. And please do consider as well your role today in the debate.
A very quick one would be, first and foremost, I did like to say that without any excuses, loads of apologies for sensitivities touched. I'm African, and sometimes we need to be understood. Context will vary. That much I can assure. But there were no intentions, whether covertly, intently, or otherwise, to make this an unsafe space. I believe that this should be an inclusive space, irrespective of our thoughts, perspectives, opinions, and that has always been my take. No intention to cause harm, and of course, I want to thank those who, of course, brought this to the fore and who continued the engagement. I'm happy hearing you repeatedly say these are conversations that will keep going and on and on. And let me say this, making my final, in addition to my final remarks, we can't run away from some of those conversations. In the global South, the place of education with the girl child, how it still pans out, the place of isolation and burnout for women, how do we tackle it? How do we prioritize it? The place of lack of access itself to resources, how does it pan out and how do we tackle it? As much as these are tough topics, I think, and I do agree, the context is how we plan the words we use, of course, do matter, and the ability to show empathy when making some of those conversations is also equally important. And I dare say thank you to everybody.
Thank you so much, Tendani. Your closing
remarks.
Remarks.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for whoever came up with the idea of inviting me here. I had an opportunity to deeply reflect upon the gender roles, and through the charts, I have seen some of the deep things that we as a society have not reflected upon. I am giving it to everybody that is there, that whatever the problems you think they are right now, African women, men working, it is your problem. Go and do something about it. I think the chair knows that I am doing something about it. This one was great to just come and talk about it, but I'm already running in the ground, making sure that we get equitable remote working opportunities. And I am so thankful for virtually meeting Dr. Prince. I'm going to follow up and we're going to have more discussions. And thank you very much to the organizers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you again to our speakers for your thoughtful contribution. Thank you to our international sign interpreters and captioner for their work. And finally, thanks to our audience for joining us today and your great question. And again, I apologize for any triggers that may have occurred. And we thank the two speakers for addressing the issues, and we continue to address these issues as we go on. To access previous dialogues, all of them are available as videos and audio on the Center's YouTube and podcast channel. Ryan will share the links with you, and further resources from our panelist organization will be sent to all participants who attended today's session next week. If you would like to get in touch with our contributors, you can do this via the team here at the center, or please send an email to Ryan, and the email address will pop up in the chat box. And lastly, we would appreciate for you to participate in our evaluation poll. Before leaving the call, it would be great if you could spare one more minute to tell us how you found today's session. And Ryan will also add a link to that. That would be extremely important, particularly for the uncomfortable and the challenging parts of the conversation. This helps us shape future conversations to be had with this dialogue. Again, my name is Malebu Sipodi, and it's been great being the moderator today. There's plenty to unpack. I hope that we can do so, in the resources that I mentioned, and I look forward to engaging with you, Dr. Prince, and see you soon, Tendani. Nice to see you. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you so much to everybody who made this possible. Bye.